This is Sean with Voices of Racing, and we're speaking to one of the main race chasers, Danny Williams. Danny, how are you doing today, and where are you located?
I'm doing wonderful. I'm here at my home office talking to one of my friends.
All right, so let's start from the beginning. You got into racing. How old were you at the very beginning when you got into racing, and what were you running at that point?
Well, I started probably in 67, 68. My oldest sister was dating a guy, Bobby Weaver, who his brother, Nick Weaver, ran stock cars at Speedrome. So I would go to the races with him, and Bobby knew I really wanted to get into racing. So he said, I've got this 57 Chevy. I'm going to make it into a race car, and we're going to go racing. So that's what happened. We actually towed the thing out to a track near Greencastle on 231. It was a track that a farmer had just made a racetrack in the back of his property, and he raced on a Sunday. So we would tow bar that car. Didn't have a trailer or anything. We'd tow bar it from the east side of Indianapolis out to almost Park County and then race. So that was my first attempt at racing. And we ran pretty good the first couple of times. The third time in the feature, I blew a tire, a right front tire, and the car just started rolling sideways and got upside down. And that was pretty much the end of that particular racing deal.
Well, like throughout your career, did you ever have any extreme wreck situations that you were injured?
Yeah, I did, as a matter of fact. In June of 1981, we had a race at Putnamville, Lincoln Park Speedway. And we had some engine problems. It was in the midget, and we didn't qualify real well. Finally figured out what the problem was. Started about mid-pack in the feature, and about 2 laps in, I saw an opening coming off of turn number 2. And I thought, well, if I really hammer it down now, I can probably pass 2 or 3 cars before I get to turn 3. Well, as I was really hammering the throttle, accelerating, a car about 3 or 4 cars ahead got sideways and spun down in front of me. I launched off the back of that car and did end over end crashes all the way down the back straightaway into turn 3, landed on all 4 wheels, fortunately, and ended up with a fractured vertebra in my neck, and my right hand was mangled pretty well and had to have surgery. So that's the worst crash I've ever been in. I've been upside down a handful of times, and they're never easy.
So I guess from your beginning until your first crash, how many years had you been running at that point? And then did that shake your motivation to keep going, or is it just one of those things that it happens and you just kept on moving through it and just kept going with the career? Did you have any moments of thinking, I'm gonna hang it up for a while?
Not really. My first midget, my brother-in-law Tony Shutt and I bought a midget in 1972, and that's when we first started running midgets. And I was lucky enough to be co-rookie of the year in the Core of Midgets Car Owners Racing Association in 72. So I had raced up until 81 without any major crashes or any problems like that until that one at Putnamville. Now in 74, I was running at Anderson Speedway, which is a high bank, quick paved quarter mile, and the right front hub broke, and the car just went straight up into the wall off of turn 4. I hit that. It kind of tipped over a little bit. But what happened was that the fuel tank split. So fuel was going down the racetrack. I'm crawling out of the car on my back, and I feel a real cold, wet sensation, and I realized it had to be fuel. About that time, a car went below us, and when that happened, I heard a whoosh, and all that fuel caught on fire. So I'm rolling around in methanol that's on fire. I'm on fire. So I try to get down to the infield, and while I'm going down there, one of the crew members of other team actually tackled me and knocked me down. but nothing really happened. I mean, my suit was singed a little bit, but I came out of it okay. So those were two of my worst crashes.
Wow. All right. So here's a shot. 1986 Terre Haute. It was a USAC midget race. Can you kind of recall this situation and tell me about your car a little bit?
Well, that's a Hollingsworth midget. Blake Hollingsworth and George Wilkins, two local racers that had done quite well in their careers, decided they could build some nice cars. So I kind of went in with them, and we had this car built. It was brand new in about 85, and it had a VW engine in it. It's a coilover car, a different suspension setup than what most people were running. And it was really a handling car, no matter whether it was on pavement or dirt. So we hauled over to Terre Haute for this particular race. I think it was during July or August county fair date. So it was hot, dry, slick, and dusty. So it was an interesting race.
All right. So this next shot is basically of the season flyer, and this also shows all the drivers for the entire season. But if people can look at the name underneath the sprint car there, it's John Batts. He was the champion that year. You became pretty close with John, and I actually happen to be friends with his son, John Jr. They've got a de-icing machines company out of Advanced, Indiana. So why don't you tell me a little bit about the significance of this? And there's also some signatures on here. So what's kind of the significance of the people that signed it and of this? Was it 1975? Is that when it was?
Yeah, it was in 1975. Car Owners Racing Association, CORA, had a series of races in the South. We ran in Tennessee, Alabama, and Mississippi. And this particular race was, as it says on the program, July 6, 1975, Twin Oaks Speedway. And we probably had 25 to 30 drivers and cars running that series for that particular trip. And John was one of them. He was a defending CORA champion. And John Batts always did way more than the equipment that he had. He was running the Chevy 2s in USAC and consistently finished in the top 10 in the USAC National Midget Points, and was always a force no matter where you went racing, whether it was pavement or dirt. So I raced quite a bit against John in our driving careers. And then later on, John bought one of my boys. They built sprint cars and midgets, Dynamite race cars. And John had a Dynamite pavement sprint car and ran with the Auto Value Super Sprints wing pavement series. We raced against them then. And this was in the early 2000s. So it was kind of full circle. I raced against him myself, and then the boys raced against him with the wing sprint car. So John was always a force to reckon with.
Well, Johnny Jr. yesterday, he asked me to ask you a couple things. How did you feel running against John Sr. wheel to wheel?
Well, he was always a clean driver. You can't ask for anything more from a driver, is that they gave you room, but they just didn't roll over and play dead on you either. So you had to work to get around John as you would anybody else. But he was a fair driver, was consistent, and I hope he feels the same way about me.
He also asked, which do you prefer, asphalt or dirt back in the day?
Well, at first, I loved the dirt because I was fairly successful on the dirt, and I struggled on the pavement, and then finally found a few tricks that I applied to the car I had at that time and got my first pavement win in a midget on a CORA program in May the 7th, 1979. And once you win, then you think you're a Superman on the pavement. So I enjoyed both, but I like the dirt because you could mess up a couple of times a lap and still gather it up and still be in contention. On pavement, you mess up and you could be a half a straightaway behind.
All right, so now we're going to go to a shot of you out on the track. Do you happen to remember where exactly this was? And you said this is an open wheel modified. It was for a USA modified team. That was your team, and you mentioned maybe this was Anderson. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe this is Anderson Speedway. We did some testing there, and this was probably one of our test days. And it was USA modified. Steve Ellis out of Fortville, Indiana. He built these modifieds as well as late models and so forth. And he had an organization called USA Modifieds. We ran Anderson, Raceway Park, Salem, Bearfield in Fort Wayne, Winchester, ran up in Michigan at Kalamazoo. So it was a fun group to run with. What you had was a 410 cubic inch engine, but you had skinny, hard tires. So you had about 8-inch wide tires that some days you felt like would make sparks on the pavement because they were so hard. And it was difficult to channel all the horsepower to the track and be able to go forward in a race. So it was a challenge. We ran a couple of years with that and had a good time.
All right, so here's a shot of you in it, and you said you had a few sponsors. You had DA Lubricant, Dynamite Welding Fabrication that your son owned, and then Jockish Florists. Is that right?
Now, Jockish Florists. Chris Jockish, who has a flower shop on the south side of Indy, huge racing supporter. Him and his family helped a tremendous amount of drivers and car owners. Now, they didn't throw a ton of money at people, but it was enough, you could buy a couple of tires or something. So it was always great to have Chris a part of our team, and we had a great time. If you look, you can see it says Asphalt Danny above the door. Dio Laycock, who I did a radio show with, nicknamed me Dirt Track Danny, and that's kind of stuck with me. So when we went pavement racing with this car, my brother-in-law Tony says, we'll call you Asphalt Danny for this episode of your life. So that's what I went with, Asphalt Danny.
All right, so let's give the viewers a second to check that out. That's directly above your head, isn't it? Listed right on the edge of the frame.
Right above the opening of the door, it says Asphalt Danny.
All right, so here is a shot of you and your team owner, Tony, and he's in the hat next to you in the suit, and then you got your two sons, and what are your sons' names?
Oh, Danny Jr. Is to my right there. Then to the outside of my right is Derek, our youngest son. They were spotters for me because we would run with radio communication. And both of them would spot and tell me, what I needed to do because both of those being race drivers, they knew more than I did, see. So they would tell me, who to go after and who to stay away from. And we had a great time running that. I ran up at Anderson one night, and there was a female driver that was racing with us that year. Her name was Populars, was her last name. And there had been a yellow, and we were lining up for the restart of the race at Anderson. And my son Derek came on the radio, and he goes, "Dad," and I go, "Yeah." He goes, "See that car in front of you?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "That's a girl in that car. You need to pass her." So they dropped the green flag, and I just overdrove that race car like you wouldn't believe. I was getting it sideways and all that. But, to no avail. She was a smooth driver. She was a good driver. I couldn't do anything with her, so I had to settle to run behind her the rest of the race. But we had a great time.
All right, so this is you and your boys when they were young down in Florida. You mentioned that you think this was at Disney, and you also hit the Daytona track. So your boys started young, loving the sport as you did. What's some of the first things they did in the sport?
Well, Danny Jr. was the first one to actually get behind the wheel. And he did that in the midget. It was the same midget that we saw earlier there at Terre Haute. And he ran that for several years down primarily at Speedrome, but we also ventured out and did some racing at Anderson and IRP and that kind of thing. And then Derek, he got into running a sprint car in 1999 and did that for several years while they were also running the Dynamite Welding and Fabrication race car shop. So both of them have been active in racing their entire lives. Many times as little toddlers, they'd fall asleep up in the grandstands while Dad was out there playing. And it's just, it's in their blood. They've been around it forever. They're good human beings. They're great fathers. They're great people. And that's the reason why, is because they were around racing, and racing had taught them many things. And it just made them better people.
So the only way they would exist is basically because of your wife, Mary, and this is your prom picture.
Yeah.
Back in high school. You said you met her. Basically, she lived close to a friend of hers lived close to a good buddy of yours. Here's also a shot of you guys back in the day. What year do you think that is? You said you're walking to the track like in the 80s?
Yeah, it had to be in the late 80s. We lived outside of Turn 4, actually, on Dolores Drive. It's between around 30th and Georgetown. So it was just a short jaunt to walk to the 40-acre parking area and walk into the racetrack. So that's one of the days that we did walk over there. And look at those legs. I mean, I had some really nice looking legs back in the day.
So you guys were able to travel a lot within the sport. How would you say Mary's love of the sport, how would you define that? What's her involvement, and also maybe who are some of the greats that she's a fan of?
Well, she's a huge Danica Patrick fan, but that's to be expected, you know, a female rooting for another female. But at the beginning, I don't think she was really into the racing as much as I was. She tolerated it because it was something I wanted to do. But over the years, she's cultivated such great friendships with people in racing. It's been our social life for 54 years, basically. And she loves it. She loves the people she's associated with. She loves the friendships that she's had and still has over the time. She dreads when the boys are racing. It makes her really nervous, and she would love for them to hang it up completely and not race anymore. She would love for the grandkids not to race, but we've got a older grandson, Nick, who's Danny Jr.'s oldest son, who's wanting to get into it. She once told me, I asked her, I said, well, how come you're always so nervous when the boys are out there racing, but you're so calm with me? And she goes, well, I can always get another husband. It's tough to get some boys. So no respect.
And you guys have been together 54 years. Is that right?
54 years.
That's a long time. I commend you for that. Long lasting. My parents hit 53 last year, and they're still going. So,
well, congratulations.
Yeah, some of the bigger purpose of doing these for the race chasers, the guys that were the drivers, or they were part of crew, or they were just fans and have a lot of great moments in racing. We're going to be able to actually create cards. We do this to link them to their documentaries. We're going to do this with Vintage Indy. This is one of our clients, the Marlboro car, but it's going to be a way that guys can just hand their story out to people throughout the year. And they're all going to be linked at racechaserstories.com. And I'm going to be coming to the meeting, and we're going to be filming at the meeting and also getting some short backstories from people and put together kind of a monthly collection of those interviews. And this is how we originally got connected, was vintage Indy event at the Dallara factory, Michael Ashmit and Al Unser Jr. were there speaking, and they brought me in to do a project, including Mario and Michael and Doug Bowles. There's almost 50 people about their favorite memories of the Unser clan. What was kind of your opinion of the Unsers? And then also, second question would be back to the Race Chasers. What do you love about the organization itself?
Well, the Unsers, they seem to be able to adapt to whatever type of car that they were racing and whatever type of racetrack they were on, whether it was short oval, super speedway, road course, street course. They excelled in all of that. What's interesting, and I see it somewhat in my family, Bobby Unser and Al Unser, they lived in the same household, was around the same people, but they ended up with what appeared to be two totally different types of personalities. And Bobby was more of the, hey, look at me, I'm the great guy and I know everything and so forth. And Al was more like, oh shucks, you know, I'm a race car driver and I do what I can, but the guy dominated. So that's somewhat like my two boys, you know, they're two distinct different personalities growing up in the same house. So Race Chasers was started by Barry Heineman and John Noggle in November of 2010 as a way for people that enjoy going to races to get together and socialize. And they came up with the idea of inviting personalities from racing to be guest speakers to kind of have an impromptu Q&A session, lunch, and so forth. So it's evolved over the years now to where what we're doing is we've partnered with Dallara IndyCar Factory. They came to us, and we hold our meetings there in their conference room, and maybe down on the first floor where there's more room when we have a lot of guests going to be there. So we invite different personalities. We had Al Unser Jr. and Mike Lashmat together in April and had over 100 people attend that. We've had Sam Schmidt. We've had Bobby Unser. We've had just numerous people, Doug Bowles, Ed Carpenter, Willie Kay, who is a promoter and track owner down in New Zealand. So you just never know who's going to be our guests, and we just have a good time, usually from 1 to 3 on a Saturday, the third Saturday of each month. And we're going to have it at the Dallara IndyCar Factory as long as they want us to be there.
All right. Well, unless there is anything else you'd like to add just about the sport, well, what would you say? This is a great way to end. What would you say is your real passion of the sport? Why has it stuck with you? Why have you wanted to stay involved over all these years?
That's really a good question, because I've asked myself that many times when the bank account's down to nothing. And I'm thinking, why did I spend all that money on that when I could have been doing it someplace else and putting it into investments? But it's just the people. It's just the people that you meet and you become friends with, and they take care of you and you take care of them. And it's the excitement. It's the smells, the sounds. It's just great being around the racetrack. As I said, the people are the most important thing. I've met so many great people, a lot of them through the Race Chasers, and I'm just blessed. I'm blessed to be able to be a part of this. I'm just a caretaker for Race Chasers. I don't own it. I don't run it. I'm just taking care of it until I'm gone, and then somebody else can be the caretaker. So racing's just a great family.
Well, Danny, I really appreciate your time today, and I look forward to saving the stories of the other Race Chasers. Everybody kind of learn from everybody else's perspectives and backgrounds. But thank you again. This is my pleasure, and these will all be at racechaserstories.com. But again, I thank you for your time, Danny, and I'm going to close this one out.
All right, Sean.
Thank you.
We'll see you Saturday.
Yeah, and just stay on the line.
Okay.